an author and podcaster with a collection of titles to share, an interview about an intriguing dystopian world that feels all too prescient in the last few years, and the return of a previous guest host. We are getting more recommendations, receiving more writing tips, and meeting a new author who might just medicate me. I'm your host, Garrett K. Jones, and this is The Right Way. Hey, welcome back to The Right Way, where we talk book recommendations, author interviews, and creative writing tips. If you haven't done so already, please make sure to take time to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and click the bell for notifications on new videos just like this one. As always, I have a few new announcements before we jump into November's content. First up, last week was the November livestream, which focused on the steps necessary for developing your storytelling skills in the fantasy genre. Something I know a decent amount about. Now, if you missed that video, you can find it up in the card that just popped up above my head, or you can wait for the option to pop up at the end of the episode. Second, I want to announce that the short story anthology I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Midnight Playground, will be released in the early part of 2025. I don't have an official release date set, but I'll have something more concrete as we get closer to New Year's. As part of this announcement, I want to let you know I started yet another 250-word microfiction writing challenge with NYC at Midnight. Try saying that 5 times fast. That competition kicked off last night. I spent last night writing out what I hope to be a really fun story that hopefully takes me into the next round of the challenge. And even if it doesn't, it will be featured in the Midnight Playground anthology. Lastly, with the holidays just around the corner, I want to let you know that I will be doing a special promotion on my books. Normally, I sell them directly for $15 each. While the individual price won't go down, I will be dropping a special promo code that can be used at checkout on my store on Square to get 15% off your total purchase. The best part about ordering directly from me is that you get signed copies. And if you're curious to see what the series is about, check out this trailer for Book 2, The Destiny of Dragons.
Now that he's back from the dead, Gavin Lake, the bastard orphan turned ranger, has decided to fully embrace his destiny. But what does that mean? The woman he loved has been murdered. The soul of the dragon he was bonded with has been obliterated. The adventure broadens, taking the dragon mist across the high seas where danger lurks in every depth and powerful lessons are learned in previously unexplored lands. Gavin has nothing to lose as he enters a new phase in his mission to face off against his greatest enemy and discover the destiny of dragons.
So a couple of years ago, I got introduced on Twix. It used to be called Twitter, and now it's called X, so naturally I call it Twix. Anyway, I connected with a UK-based author and podcast host by the name of Geoff Jones. Trust me, just because we share the same surname doesn't make us related. At least I don't think so. Anyway, there's a lot of Joneses out there, especially in Wales, so maybe distantly, but that's not the point. To return the favor of being interviewed in an episode of his podcast, I invited Geoff onto my show as a guest host, so here he is providing his top 10 book recs.
Hello, I'm Geoff Jones, host of the Geoff Jones and Friends Make It Better podcast, co-host of Cereal Milk, producer of Jeff Flicks, and the author of children's book Teacher's Day Off. I'm absolutely delighted to bring you my top 10 book recommendations. Here we go. So at number 10, we've got Dead After Dark by Sherrilyn and Kenyon. I love Dead After Dark because it combines kind of these two addictive elements of that paranormal excitement and everyone's guilty pleasure, a little bit of romance. It offers an escape into a world of dark fantasy where danger lurks, but at the heart of it, there's this kind of a passionate love story. At number 9 is The Giver by Lois Lowry. So I'm not going to lie, I love a bit of a dystopian. And this is set in a dystopian society that at first glance, as it always does, seems perfect. Everything is controlled, emotions, memories, choices. The story follows Jonas, who's like this, 11, 12-year-old kid, he's selected to be the new receiver of memory. And this is like a huge honor in their society, and he trains under the Giver, and his knowledge kind of makes Jonas just question the way his world is structured. At number 8, so I've got the Outsider for my number 8. And it starts with this kind of brutal crime in this small town, and all the evidence points to this well-respected teacher, and who's also like a Little League coach. But what makes it so good is it starts out as this kind of classic crime thriller, but then Stephen King just absolutely pulls the rug out from under us with this terrifying supernatural twist. Sorry. Number 7 is, I suppose it's a little left field, especially considering the rest of the list, but it's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. It's just wild, right? It's wild, it's chaotic. It's kind of this journey through an American counterculture culture of the 60s and 70s. It follows journalist Raoul Duke and his attorney, Dr. Gonzo, as they embark on this kind of drug-fueled trip to Las Vegas under this absolute pretense of covering a motorcycle race. Number 6. So we've got The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Yes, it's another dystopian future. If you've not seen it, then basically, in short, the nation of Panam is divided into these kind of 12 districts, all under the oppression of the rule of the capital. What they do is they kind of force each of these 12 districts to send 2 tributes, a boy and a girl, to participate in the Hunger Games, which is like this televised fight to the death. Number 5, it's time for some culture, and I've chosen An Inspector Calls by J.B. Priestley. And it's a play set in 1912, which focuses on the wealthy Berlin family who are celebrating an engagement dinner when suddenly they're interrupted by Inspector Good. And he informs them that a young woman has eked herself off, and each member of the family is somehow connected to her. Number 4 is a timeless classic, and it's A Christmas Carol by a little-known author and playwright named Charles Dickens. If you've not heard of him, do Google him. Number 3, but it is another dystopian tale. It's Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. So I guess I should start by saying that I actually loved the movie for this. And watch the film before reading the book, which I suppose lots of people do these days. I actually prefer it because if I read the book then watch the film, I get angry. Whereas if I watch the film then read the book, it explains more, kind of like a user manual. Number 2, and what do we want? More Stephen King. This time it's Misery, a psychological horror about a successful author famous for Victorian romance series. Basically, after finishing his latest book, he decides it's the end of the series. while he's like driving through a snowstorm, he gets in an accident and he's rescued by Annie Wilkes, a former nurse and the author's number one fan. And she takes him to this remote home to recover. Now, at first, Annie seems like a caring savior, but it really becomes obvious quite quickly that, she's unwell. And my number one, but of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, I've read it several times from the age of probably 14 to the very young, sprightly 42 I am now, most recently last year. And just every time, it's like reading it for the first time, and I hope the ending's different. For those of you who've not read it, it's just this heartbreaking story set during the Great Depression in America, following these kind of two displaced ranch workers, George and Lenny, as they chase this dream of owning a piece of land. Right. Thank you for putting up with the change in my hairstyles, and listen to my top 10. If there's something in there that you've not read or not picked up for a while, then I hope that you give it a go. Otherwise, keep reading. Thank you very much. I have been Geoff Jones. I should say that. I'm not very good at promotion.
A big thank you goes out to Geoff for being this month's Top 10s presenter. I'll have more information about him later in the video. There are a lot of books out there about what happens when disease and illness spread rampant across the globe. From Michael Crichton's Andromeda Strain to Stephen King's The Stand, to pretty much anything written by Dean Koontz, Max Brooks, or Jonathan Mayberry. Most of those take on a horror element more than anything else. This month's author interview features a discussion about a very on-the-nose pandemic that hits a bit more close to home given recent years. So with that in mind, please help me welcome Emily Hodson, author of Medicate Me. All right, Emily, thank you for joining me on the show. It is a pleasure to have you. Tell me about your work and what it is that you write.
Yeah, so I have like things that I've written in the past, like when I was like a little younger, but typically when I do write, it's like thriller, fiction, sci-fi, and that's kind of my current one. It's actually a combo, a thriller and a sci-fi. That's what I've been focusing on as my newest book.
And the newest book is called Medicate Me, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What's it about?
Yeah, so it's kind of a unique take on a fictional pandemic that I set. I actually wrote it during COVID for inspiration, and I came up with this idea where I wanted it to kind of like in the beginning read like somebody's like journal thoughts, like people are just really stressed about this pandemic in my book, and it's 5 first-person present time POVs of like two females and 3 males, and they're all either intertwined already or they start to intertwine throughout the book. And basically, what's going on in this premise is, well, they're all in Seattle. A couple of them are in Renton, a suburb of Seattle, and not only are they dealing with mental health problems, but they start to discover like weird things, unanswered questions about like what is the virus, why is there a lockdown, and then there's like a pharmaceutical shortage with all these conspiracies and rumors where people keep hearing different things about like, is it true, or how are they distributing medication if there's pharmacy shortage. And so the characters are just kind of trying to figure it out, and either by themselves or together, and then they start to find out all these like there's like multiple twists in the book that so far a lot of people are shocked about who have read it.
That's really cool. It definitely sounds very reminiscent of what we were experiencing 4 years ago. So how did you get into writing? Was this something that you've always wanted to do, or did you just wake up one day and be like, you know what, I feel like I need to write a book?
Yeah, so this actually, it started when I was like 5, kind of funny story, but like I was like in church with my mom, and I was kind of bored at church, and I told my mom I was like bored during service, like, and she was like, she gave me a pen and paper and said, just draw or just write or something. And so then I started drawing little things. And then fast forward, in a car ride at 7, again, Mom, I'm bored. My mom turns around, gives me a pen and paper, just write. And then at 7 years old, I wrote like a little children's book, really horrible drawing and writing, but I still have it. And yeah, I started with that, and then basically as I got older, it was like one step at a time, like short story, children's book, smaller books, and then now I write like full length novels type of thing.
That's really cool. Yeah, I kind of got my start at a young age as well. What are some of the inspirations that you have in writing? Obviously, you drew inspiration from what was going on with the COVID-19 pandemic, because I mean, it was right there in front of you. How could you not? But what are some other things that inspire you when you're in that writing creative phase?
Yeah, well, usually I admit I actually watch more movies and listen to more audiobooks than I read. I do read, but I'm very slow at it. It can take me 2 weeks to 3 months to finish a book because I also don't want to part with the book. Like I just kind of like a TV show, pick up with the series episode 1, 2 kind of thing. And so I actually am such a visual person. What was I getting at with this? Yeah, I'm a visual person, so I consume so many movies and television shows daily that it's stored in my brain it's tucked away for if I want to clash that with my ideas and then grab things from the real world or from my own experiences. That's like that's what inspires me. And then, of course, if I have either a really great experience in life or a really scary experience, a sad experience, it's kind of based on my mood with whatever I'm writing or whatever chapters in my life personally.
So, what has been one of the biggest challenges or one of the hardest parts of being a writer that you've encountered?
I would say it's actually I was about to say writer block, but it's actually not that. It's that I have a full-time job and that like blocks me, like, and then I get a writer's block from the block of the work. And so I feel like a lot of people who are writers also work full time, and I think that that is like the biggest challenge is like compartmentalizing my brain from data stuff and processing stuff at my work from home job and then getting off work to like write or edit or work on my audiobook. But anyways, that is all just a part of compartmentalizing being a writer. I have to like really shift my focus and really like get onto it.
With all that said, as far as some of the challenges that you face, what would be some advice that you would give to other would-be authors out there watching or listening to this and trying to get some insight for what they're doing?
Well, okay, so I feel like if somebody has been writing or dabbling since they're a kid, I would like kind of tell them like self-reflect the why, because when I hear people like that, they're like saying I'm busy or I don't have time or I can't write more than a page. I would say go back to your roots and figure out why you were into it. If it's someone just wanting to straight up write, like maybe they're 25, 40, I would just say it's the more you overthink, the less writing, the more procrastination, the more distractions online of like looking at other people doing their thing with writing. And I think it's very hard, I struggle with this, is like not looking at other people's stuff and trying to like distract or come up with excuses to not write. I just figure go outside on your porch, just kind of think about your day or the last few years of your life and watch a lot of movies and TV shows that are of your genre interest kind of thing. And kind of just a mix of everything, but most importantly, no overthinking. And that's what I still do.
Well, that's cool. So, Emily, how can people connect with you and get copies of Medicate Me?
Yeah, so the best way to connect with me, I'm like, honestly, yeah, I don't even have a Facebook page. I just do Instagram. No TikTok. Sorry, I don't like TikTok, but uh well, I'm not good at it. I think I'm a little too old for TikTok. No, I'm kidding. Instagram is very special to me. Like, I've had it since 2011, so that's kind of like my favorite place to be. People can catch me on Bookstagram. That's what they call it now. When I joined, my handle. Do you want me to give you my handle?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. It's a one word. It's Emily Hodson. EmillyHodson_author.
Cool.
Oh gosh.
And do you have a website?
In production. I got to get onto that. Thanks for reminding me. I've just been literally, I've been such a simple person. I just have a website on Instagram page that just says buy my book on Amazon or Poshmark or Mercari. But I really need it. I heard it's just way more professional, so I got to get onto that.
All right, Emily, thank you for entertaining me here on The Right Way. This has been a lot of fun getting to know you as an author, and I'm glad that we were able to do this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Garrett, for having me on the interview. It was fun.
I'm glad you had a good time. Thank you to Emily, this month's Author Awareness interviewee. I'll have more information about where to get a copy of her book in just a bit. Last month, you got to hear writing tips from HR expert Winifred Summer. This month, SM Warlow, who provided the October top 10s, makes another return to provide writers in the making with some tips to help improve their skill set. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Hello, this is SM Warlow, author of the Tales of the Phoenix Titans series, here today with JKG Publishing to give you some writing tips from my little writing history here. I guess the first point I start with is guard your creative space, I suppose. And what that means is make sure you carve out uninterrupted writing time. Nothing worse than going into those big heavy scenes and having to sort of start, stop, and getting those interruptions in there. So make sure you're carving out appropriate time. For me personally, that looks like 2, maybe 3 hours of writing, depending on how we get on, and make sure I'm keeping that time as quiet and as clear as possible. So often that means using headphones or sort of white noise or music, something that matches the vibe of the scene you're writing. And I think a lot of people talk about making sure that those writing moments are scheduled as well. So that might, depending on the lifestyle you've got, that might be 1 hour a week, that might be an hour an evening, whatever works for you. The second is to recharge between your big epics, I suppose. So after finishing your book, so once you've got past the first draft point, or even the second, third draft point, depending on how you work, make sure you give yourself that breathing room after finishing. So for me, that looks like after I finish a book, I take some time out from writing, which probably goes against like a lot of the stuff that some authors out there will advise. For me personally, this is what works, is that I take some time, let the ideas for the next book percolate, and let it simmer without some pressure, I suppose. And it gives me a bit of time to absorb that new inspiration and reset, I suppose. When in the writing phase, or writing mode as I like to call it, I like to set milestones. So rather than thinking, hey, I need to finish this book now, it actually becomes a point of sort of working in milestones rather than the big projects. That's one chapter at a time, basically. So next I'm going to talk to you about plotting and plotting of your grand adventure. So it's very important when you're working on big series, you map out the character arcs, you map out the world events, and you map out those key moments. There's nothing worse than a series that kind of ambles through without a care in the world. I can certainly think of a few large series in the movie world particularly that have failed to do this throughout. So make sure you've got the consistency throughout, that the character arcs are clear, that the world events are clear, and that those key story beats all line up. Basically what you want is your reader to come to the end of your trilogy, of your quadrilogy, of your series, of just your book, where it's actually very clear what you're trying to achieve. So basically know the beginning, know the middle, know the end before you dive in. The next thing I want to talk to you about is what I call skip and circle back. So when you're in the writing phase and you head down in the document and you're powering through the scene that you've got, there often comes points where you'll hit a roadblock, and I've definitely had this before a few times. So basically if a sentence, if a scene, if like just a paragraph feels like it's a real challenge, you can't kind of get the words out. You know what you want to say, but you can't get the words down on paper. What I do is I mark it in the document, usually in bold underlined text that basically sort of says expand or move on. And then what I'll do is I'll come back to it as I finish those scenes. So bear in mind, I work in chapters in my document. So I will work through the chapter, hit a small roadblock or a bump in the road, identify it, mark it, continue writing on. And then I'll come back to that when I review that chapter as I go. So it's an iterative cycle, basically. Divide and conquer. So I kind of touched on this earlier on. This basically talks about how I make use of sort of two main tools in my writing. So the first is Grammarly, which is pretty good. I know a lot of people use Pro Writing Aid as well, which is also a really great tool. But the way it's more about organisation and tools, this topic. So what I do is I have one document per chapter, which enables me to organise my thoughts in that way. But what I do is I use those documents as sort of the work in progress section. And then I'll have my Word document, which is the master doc, if you will, which is effectively what goes to print when I've finished my second draft, basically. So when I'm ready to review and start editing, that becomes the main document. So what I'll do is use those chapters from Grammarly, complete those, use all the work I'm doing, use all the iterative stuff. Once I'm happy with it, that's copied and pasted into the final document, into the master doc. And that basically allows me to, like I said, break down the milestones, which I already touched on before, but also assemble it into like an easy management system. And that Word document is backed up over and over again into the cloud and everything. So there's no risk there. And it just helps me to kind of streamline the revision and the reordering of everything. The next topic is world building. So obviously working in sci-fi is very important that the world building is very clear. So make sure it feels lived in with the rules, the cultures, the history. So what I do is I have a working document that I keep in the background that enables me to keep track of the factions, leaders, the people, kind of history of those factions, and what the future of those factions looks like as well as the story progresses. So I think it's really important that you know what you're weaving into the narrative and how those factions are going to interact with one another going forward, but also sort of what they've done in the past as well. Very much in the case of sci-fi and in fantasy as well, I think your world should feel like a character of itself, so almost treat the world and the sort of bigger factions as characters. The final point I'd like to touch on is to know your characters inside and out. In the Phoenix Titan series, several members of the crew, and the several members, several characters who are outside of the crew members. Now, what I've done to ensure sort of cohesion within the characters is to know the backstories of those characters inside and out. And although some of the characters, like Gordon, for example, were very ambiguous up until about the third story, I think it was really important for me to know what the histories of those characters and make sure that it's very clear for me when I'm writing to know how that sort of history has impacted them in the here and now, as in the moment that I'm writing. The other thing, I suppose, with characters as well is give them strengths, give them flaws, give them secrets that they guard closely. There's nothing worse than sort of like the flawless character, which again has become quite prolific over recent years in modern media. I think it's really important that your character has a flaw, because ultimately they have to have something to overcome, be it a personal demon or otherwise. Like, you cannot have a character who's absolutely perfect, who's the absolute perfect archetype. So give them something to overcome, give them a strength they can use to their advantage. And in the case of certain characters who maybe aren't POV in your story, give them secrets, give them intrigue. You want your character to be, you want your reader to gravitate there, I suppose, towards that character. So super important that you have an understanding of your characters and where they're going to go and what they've done. I hope these have been helpful. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, I am available there as SM Warlow_author. Always happy to help out members of the writing community. Thank you very much, and hope this was useful.
A big thank you goes out to SM Warlow, as well as Emily Hodson and Geoff Jones for being my guests on this month's full episode. Now, if you'd like to connect with any of them on social media or get copies of their work, you can find all of those links down in the video description. Hey, thanks for watching. If you haven't done so by this point in the video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications on new videos just like this one. If you're interested in being a channel supporter, you can find links for Patreon and the merch store on Teespring, or if you'd like to make a one-time donation, you can find my link for Cash App. Make sure to tune in just a few weeks when the Holiday Showcase airs at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Saturday, December 7th. I'll be at the zoo for my son's birthday, but you'll have a great episode to watch. Until then, happy Thanksgiving, and if you don't live in the United States, happy end of November.